Hey Dan, the lighting down here is terrible. I apologize for that. It's Friday, end of September, last Friday in September, and I thought I would finally talk about this Nitro cold brew system that I've set up. So the first thing I needed was a kegerator, which is essentially just a refrigerator that you've turned into a place to store kegs. Often you'll see kegerators that are fully self-contained, that they'll have a tap coming right off the top of the kegerator. You know, especially on the little college dorm fridges that with a door down here, that works great. This one of course has the lid on top. So what I did was I bought a chest freezer. I put an aftermarket thermostat on it and made it into a chest refrigerator so that, you know, it's set at like 36 degrees or something. So the first thing I had to do, of course, was I had to drill holes in the chest freezer to accommodate, hold on a second, sorry, to accommodate all the lines coming in. So what I did was, the first thing I did is I drilled holes in the back. Well, I didn't know, I had no idea how a chest freezer is engineered, and I'm telling you now in case you do the same thing. What they do is they take and they run the refrigerant lines around the inside wall of the perimeter, around and around and around of the walls of the freezer, and that's where the refrigerant runs. So not knowing that, I ended up drilling directly through one of the refrigerant lines. My local refrigeration guys came out and resoldered it, and then I did it again. It's a long story, and eventually I just thought I can't use this freezer for this anymore because it's going to look like crap. So I ended up getting a new freezer, unfortunately. So this time I drilled them in the lid. You can see I've got the lines coming in, the lines going out, and then this right here is a nitro infuser. So what happens is, well, here, let me take a step back. What I've got is I've got a nitrogen tank, and it's food grade, as you can see. So, which is nice because the friend of mine who owns that cabin that we just had that guy's weekend at, he owns Mississippi Welders, and that's where I get all of my nitrogen. And nitrogen is pretty cheap, so it's $23 for that whole tank right there. $29 maybe, and that lasts me about 2 weeks. So really, per ounce of beverage that is pushing, it's pretty negligible in terms of cost. So what I do is I have the line running from that to this manifold, and then the manifold, so I've got a master pressure here, and then this manifold I can dial in pressures for each particular application that I have inside the cooler. So I've got like 40 psi for the nitro infuser, and I have just like 10 psi for the flat cold brew and also for the kombucha, simply because I don't need, if I had higher psi's than that, the nitrogen would actually infuse in the beverage as it's sitting down here in the tank, and I would end up with bubbly cold brew inadvertently, or even more bubbly kombucha, which is not what I want. So what I've got is I've got these coming in. The line that's for the nitro infuser comes here, it splits off, it goes down to the tank, and now it's just the pressure down here is just pushing it back out of this line, and then you've got nitrogen and beverage coming through there. It infuses and it comes out and goes up. I also have a line coming in to this tank. Here's the second line coming in, and this nitrogen is simply pushing the flat cold brew out and up, and then I've got kombucha. Now what I've got on the kombucha is I've got a different kind of connector. These are ball lock connectors, so it's and then the others are pin lock connectors. That way I can't mix up my kombucha and my cold brew. And then this right here is actually a full tank of cold brew that's just sitting waiting to be used. So my kombucha is almost empty. That's good. And then this one is almost empty as well, so I'll probably be changing that one this weekend. You can see I've got a couple of pennies underneath that lid. And the reason I do is because I needed to shim that in order to, because that gasket had been compressed so much that it's just a little flattened out. So this allowed me to get a little more pressure on that gasket. So that's the refrigeration side. And then, like I said, there's the lines going up and through the floor up to the tap. The other thing I needed for this project, of course, were these kegs. These are called Cornelius kegs or corny kegs. And you can see they've got these pin lock connectors on them. And here's the lid. Here's that gasket I was telling you about. So I got these from our local Coke guy. They used to be the Coke distributor for this region, for Winona anyway. And I know him pretty well. So he had a bunch of extra kegs that were actually still sitting under pressure. Like these two are still under pressure with club soda in them. So I think what's happened over time is as they've sat there, those gaskets those giant O-rings have flattened out, which means, of course, they're not going to seal as well. Also, each of these connectors has a gasket. So what I've done is I've picked up extra gaskets and been able to replace those. That way I don't have those issues going forward with leaks. So anytime I hook something up in here, the first thing I have to do is take a little bit of soapy water, which I have there, and spray it on the connection, especially on that lid, around that lid, to make sure there's no leaks. And if there is, I futz with it until it's not leaking, because obviously I don't want all my nitrogen to go out into the atmosphere. Same thing here. When I'm ready to swap out a tank, all I have to do is just shut the valve off, unscrew this, screw it onto the new tank, make sure all the fittings, nothing's leaking, and Bob's your uncle. I've got nitro. So here, let's go upstairs and I'll show you what it looks like on the upstairs side. So here is the nitro. I just poured a cup and I brought it outside so you can see the way it falls down the side. So what it's doing is it looks a lot like, again, a stout. In fact, it uses the same connector, the same tap, and the same faucet, tap faucet, as a Guinness stout does. It's called a stout faucet. So anyway, that's my whole setup. And yeah, it's been going really well. I've been actually selling quite a bit of it. And then the kombucha is made by a couple named Matt and Jessica. They own Big River Kombucha, and they brew it here locally. So yeah, I'll be getting another keg from them hopefully before the weekend. So when I replaced my first keg, so when I ran it dry and swapped it out for a full one, I realized that I had a bit of a problem, and that was, how am I going to clean this thing? I couldn't quite figure it out, and here, let me show you why. So here's the full keg. So the first thing I have to do is I have to release all the pressure. So this is where this is the gas inside. So I can do it with my finger if I'm tough enough. I can just push it down and release that pressure. Somewhat tedious process depending on how, let me see if I can find a rock that would actually help. There. Uh-oh. There we go. Okay. I've got most of that. Nope, it's still not enough gas released. So, let's see. Something a little, oh, here we go. Got a key. Okay, got all the residual pressure released. Ah, now the lid comes off. Okay, so here's the problem, is if you can see down in here, I don't know if you can quite see down in there, but you've got that tube that runs down right, you know, from this, the tube runs all the way down to the bottom, and that's, so the nitrogen goes in at the top and forces the coffee through the only outlet there is, which is up that tube. And so you can see all the coffee residue at the bottom, and that's fine. I can clean that, but I thought, well, how am I going to clean this connector and clean that tube out to get those coffee oils out? So I thought, well, I guess I could hook it up to the, you know, put cleanser in it, hook it up to the nitrogen, and then run the cleanser through it that way. But God, that's such a pain in the butt, because I don't want to have to go down and have another connection to the nitrogen tank. So what I did was, I thought, well, if I had an ability to pump it like a hand pump, I could pump the pressure up and make that work. So I thought, well, hell, I've got a pump. So I grabbed my old bicycle pump, and what I did was I just simply took off the Schrader valve off the end, which is the valve that you use to fill your bike tires with. And I put on a connector, and fortunately the hose barb, which is a 1/4-inch hose barb on the end of this thing, fit into that hose, so that was actually perfect. So I just put a connector on there, and then I made another connector with just a hose going out so that I could just simply pump it out right into the sink. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so what I did was, I've got this hose with a connector on the outside of the keg. Okay. Not on the outside, on the going outside. And then I hook up the connector with the hose on it. I've got my lid back on. And now simply all I have to do, if you can see this, is pump the pressure up. Because I don't need a lot of pressure, I just need enough to get the cleanser through. So now I'm just simply pumping the cleanser through. I've already, I put about 2 gallons of hot water in there with some coffee cleanser, and then I scrubbed it around. And now I'm pumping and cleaning out that drip tube. So what I'll do is, once this runs through for a couple minutes, I will take these connectors off, take the lid off, rinse it out, fill it with clean water, and then pump it through again, and then it'll be clean, I'll be ready to go. So that was my low-cost solution to my problem. So I'd say all in all, this project's been worth it. It's been a lot of fun getting it all. It's been a lot of frustration getting it all connected and ready to go and working. What I found is, like with anything, there's, you know, so much information out there, too much information out online, that it's hard to decide until you actually buy things what's going to work and what's not. And I found a lot of things that didn't work, a lot of connectors that didn't work. There's a clamp called an Oetiker clamp versus a regular hose clamp. Oetiker clamps are, once you clamp them on, they don't come off. I mean, you cut them off, but it's not like a hose clamp that you can reuse again and again and again. And tubing and manifolds. I bought a manifold I had to return because it was crap, didn't work. You know, it's like anything. You have to work at it, and if you're gonna do it all yourself, you've got to figure it out. And since you're doing it for the first time, you have to learn as you go. So yeah, if anybody out there in YouTube land is interested in this and has questions about how I did it, you're welcome to contact me through this channel or at Carew, that's C-A-R-E-W, at mugbyjunction.com. So anyway, Dan, that's all I got to say. So that's my story, and I am sticking to it.